So I know yesterday it was reported kinda in some news circles that an opposition MP, there was a search warrant executed on an opposition MP. Now, when I had started doing these lives in the COVID period, I had started doing these lives really and truly because I wanted people to be clear on what the health initiatives were and what needed to be done, because I felt that coming out of the press conferences, there was just so much foolishness arising out of the question and answers. So that's why I started doing these lives. Now, I mean, on a daily basis, I am seeing stories that need to be corrected or need to be elaborated on or need to be discussed. So let's get into the story of the opposition MP. And let me go with what I know, or the little bit that I know. I am aware, or I've been told, that as a result of FATCA legislation that we had to fight very hard to pass, investigations have been ongoing into suspicious transactions. You all know that the FIU every so often puts out reports about suspicious transactions and transactions being flagged. So I've heard that there are accounts that have been flagged, and questions that have to be asked about those accounts. I also realize that the person who has questions to answer is not in the country right about now. The person isn't here. So there's been talk within opposition circles that the person is aware that that he, she, or it under investigation, or will have questions to answer with respect to questions about monies and where and how he, she, or it would have gotten the monies. And so the reason that we've been given for why the person is out of the country is not really the reason that the person out of the country. The reason we've been given had to do with duties, parental duties, and those kinds of things. My understanding is that the person is out of the country to possibly avoid having to answer questions. The other interesting thing I was told is that prior to the person leaving the country, the person and his or her leader had a huge quarrel and meltdown over the questions that had to be answered and the directions in which the questions and the answers would point to, and who might also, as a domino effect, have to answer questions. So there is the possibility that the person who has questions to answer, the opposition MP, who for whom there might be a search warrant, there's every possibility that explain your wealth might become a thing with respect to that person. There's every possibility that if the investigation is a successful investigation, it's not just that person who will have to explain things about wealth. And so I can only hope that the investigation turns out to be a successful investigation, or that the investigation is completed successfully, and we will find out yes or no when they eventually answer questions. I will not be calling any names on my live, because when I get pre-action protocol letters, it's not only that paying my lawyer's bills, right? That being said, the response to my pre-action protocol letter coming soon, so I may have that to do it earlier, if not end of this week, maybe next week. So basically, to let all you know, clearly FATCA working out for us, because FATCA has allowed for yet another investigation to take place, and we will, I guess, with the passage of time, we will find out whether or not that investigation will be successful. But that is my understanding with respect to that particular issue there. And I've had one or two persons from within the United National Congress messaged me to let me know that the argument I tell you about, that the argument took place, that there was a huge meltdown between the person and the person's leader, and as a result of that, that is where the decision to travel came, and there are questions that need to be answered. What I find particularly instructive, and again, this is something that amuses me about voter bases here, right? Or at least this the UNC voter base. Barry Padderath has picked up himself and traveled to the United States. Now, he picked up himself, traveled to the United States, clear in the knowledge that the borders were going to be closed, and there was no clear indication of when the borders were going to be reopened. And he traveled. He's well within his right to do that. Nobody can stop him from traveling. And you have heard not a peep from the constituency. Not a peep from the constituency. Nobody protested, nobody up in arms, nobody writing letters, nothing. Worse than that, you have heard no announcement by the opposition leader, whether it is to her base or even to the country in general, because it's not just people from her political party that live in that constituency. It would be people from across the political spectrum. No announcement has been made at all to anybody about how the needs of the constituents of that seat are being met. There's no talk about that at all. None whatsoever. Not even in media, right? There are no stories about it. And the stunning thing that I learned is that Lovell Francis was the MP that they actually go into. So when from Barry Padderath's constituency, I've been told that when they go to Barry Padderath's constituency office, they're being told to go to the Moruga Tableland constituency office. Right? So you have a situation where constituents from one seat are going over to another seat to be able to have their needs met. With this whole COVID thing, to be able to get things like, I've heard hampers and food cards and any sort of social services at all, they have been going from their constituency and going over to the Moruga Tableland constituency. That blows my mind. And not a story being told. Nothing there. So weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of stories about not enough aid or support reaching people, but no story at all about how the Princestown issue being dealt with, right? So in hearing that, I thought to myself, but here is a valid story. Here's a story that ought to be in the public domain. And this has been a valid story from the jump, right? Because it's not like we weren't aware that MP Padderath left the country. And so all of the implications of him not being here as a member of parliament has just never been explored. So when I get some time, I'm going to take a look, I'm going to find out, how can he be out of the parliament for as long as he has been out of the parliament? How many sittings can he miss? Those kinds of things. Because I think it's important for us to at least understand how representation is supposed to take place here. Because there doesn't seem to be any sort of urgency on the part of the United National Congress to talk about how their MP, what measures their MP putting in place to ensure that he does what he's supposed to be doing. Right? Because he's supposed to be treating with the needs of all his constituents. It can't just be about, treating with the needs of just himself. And if that is the case, well then, you know, I need to find out more. I definitely need to find out more. Right, so that is me there dealing up with Barry Paderat and the search warrant and that kind of thing.